When you think about the biggest companies in the world, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, what if I told you there's one single company that holds the master key to all of them, and many more? But here's the thing. This isn't a company you ever see on stage at some flashy product launch. They didn't invent the iPhone. They're not building rockets to go to Mars. What they are building is something far more powerful: influence. So what do they have? Well, they have money. Lots and lots of it. We're talking over $10.6 trillion in assets under management. Just try to picture that for a second. That's a 10 with 12 zeros after it. It's a staggering number. And look, to really wrap your head around that, let's put it in perspective. That $10.6 trillion, it's more than the entire economies of Germany and Japan combined. It is an economic force bigger than every single country on Earth, except for the US and China. That's just insane. Now, you might be thinking this is just some abstract pile of cash held by far-off billionaires. But it's not. If you have a 401k, a pension, even just a simple index fund, chances are your savings are already flowing right through their systems. You're already a part of this story, whether you know it or not. The name of this company, it's BlackRock. And this is the real story of how they became, without a doubt, the world's most powerful financial force. So, okay, how does a single company end up becoming the central pipes for all of global finance? I mean, to really get their power, you first have to understand what BlackRock is, and maybe even more importantly, what it isn't. And this is the absolute key distinction right here. BlackRock is an asset manager. They are not a bank. Okay? A bank takes your deposits and technically owns them. BlackRock doesn't do that. They're what's called a fiduciary, which means they manage money on behalf of other people, pension funds, universities, and everyday investors. Here's a good way to think about it when you invest in one of their funds. You're still the legal owner of those stocks and bonds, but, and this is a big but, BlackRock holds the remote control. They're the ones making the decisions. They're the ones casting the votes. They are the active managers of your passive investment. So how did they get so big so fast? Well, their explosive growth was basically supercharged by one of the biggest shifts in modern finance, the rise of passive investing. The whole idea was, instead of trying to beat the market, people just started buying the entire market through index funds. And as literally trillions of dollars flooded into the strategy, BlackRock's iShares ETFs became the #1 place for all that money to go. But here's the kicker. Managing all that cash gives them something way more valuable than just fees. It gives them voting power. And that, my friends, is the real power in the corporate world. See, because BlackRock pools the investments of millions of people, they've become the largest shareholder in, well, pretty much everything. If you look at the S&P 500, America's biggest corporate giants, in over 90% of those companies, BlackRock is a top 3 shareholder. Let that sink in for a moment. So what does that voting power, they call it proxy voting, what does it actually control? Well, for starters, it controls who gets to sit on the board of directors. The people who hire and fire the CEO. It has a huge influence on how much that CEO gets paid, and more, it's steering major corporate policies on everything from climate change to social issues, stuff you've probably heard bundled under the term ESG. There's a great quote from an analyst that just nails it. When you represent 7% of a company's stock, the CEO answers your phone calls. Look, this isn't some grand conspiracy, it's just the fundamental math of how corporations are run. And this is exactly where BlackRock's quiet influence becomes impossible to ignore. All right, so this corporate influence, it really does stretch into every single corner of the economy, including one of the most controversial topics out there, housing. Now, there's a ton of confusion about this, so let's just clear the air and break down the truth. Okay, first things first, and this is super important. BlackRock does not buy single-family homes. I repeat, they don't. That viral headline you saw was almost certainly talking about a different company called Blackstone. I know, similar name, but a totally different business. Blackstone is a private equity firm. BlackRock is an asset manager. However, that doesn't mean they're not involved. In fact, BlackRock's influence on housing is arguably way deeper and more systemic. For starters, they're one of the world's biggest buyers of mortgage-backed securities, so they own the debt on millions of homes. They're also major shareholders in those giant corporate landlords that do buy up entire neighborhoods. In essence, they provide the financial plumbing that makes the whole housing market work. So the real takeaway here is this.
While BlackRock isn't your direct landlord, their role is actually way more significant. You could say they aren't the landlord, they're the landlord's boss.
But if we really want to get to the true core of BlackRock's power, it's not just about the trillions they manage. It's about their secret weapon, a piece of technology that gives them a view of the entire global economy that, frankly, no one else has. It's called Aladdin, and you can think of it like a central nervous system for the financial world. It's this massive software platform that doesn't just analyze risk for BlackRock's own money, but also for other huge banks, insurance companies, and even governments who pay a fortune to use it. So, just how much of the system does Aladdin see? Get this. The software monitors over $21 trillion in assets. That is more than double what BlackRock itself even manages. We're talking about a huge chunk of all the world's financial wealth, all flowing through this one single platform. What this does is give BlackRock an absolutely insane data advantage. They can literally see how capital is moving around the globe. They can spot risks before anyone else does. They can understand market trends on a macro level that no competitor could ever hope to match. They aren't just a player in the game. They can see the code behind the entire matrix. So, to wrap this all up, BlackRock didn't get here through some hostile takeover. They did it through pure efficiency, by creating products like low-cost index funds that millions of people wanted. But their success has led to this unprecedented concentration of financial power. And that raises a really critical question. The question isn't whether they're good or evil, but whether it's safe for any single company to have this much quiet influence over our entire economy. If you want to understand how money really moves in America, subscribe to Finance Deep Dive. Because here, we don't just follow headlines, we follow the money.